Hello, my name is Elizabeth Gill. I am the Director of Career Services and Alumni Engagement at the Jackson Institute for Global Affairs here at Yale University. I look forward to welcoming you to New Haven in a few weeks. In the meantime, please watch this short video and submit to me your one-page resume. We ask for your resume for two reasons. The first is that we'll be using it for an activity during orientation called a resume gallery. During that activity, you'll be able to receive feedback on your resume and also learn more about your fellow classmates. We'll also be creating a resume booklet. We will be sharing this book with faculty, staff, senior fellows, and world fellows so that they can learn more about you. Please send me your resume by August 2nd by email. Before sending me your resume, please do the following. The first is to please review this short video. The second is to create your resume or revise it if you already have one. The third is to be sure to read over your resume, proofread it, and make sure that not only you do it, but ask someone else to do it too, perhaps a friend or a mentor or someone that you're working with currently. And finally, please send me your resume as a Word document so that I can insert changes and comments by email. Here's my email address, elizabeth.gill@yale.edu. As you start working on your resume, please make sure to follow the following formatting guidelines. First, make sure that you use a font that's no smaller than 11. It's quite difficult to read anything smaller than 11 point. Please also use Times New Roman or something else that's standard. Please be mindful of your formatting. Instead of embedding tables into your document or using a lot of spaces, use tabs. And if you have questions about how to do that, just send me your document and I'm happy to help format it. And finally, if there are skills or responsibilities that you've had in the past that you're trying to move away from or that are not relevant to jobs that you'll be looking for in the future, feel free now to go ahead and remove those from the one-page document. As you start your document at the top, please include just your name and email address. That's all we need for the Jackson resume, for the gallery, and for the resume book. In other future resumes for internships or jobs, you'll include your address, your phone number, and perhaps other contact information. Here are examples of the headers that I'm talking about. For our resume book, we just want your name and your Yale email address. Please do use your Yale email address whenever you can, because it does look quite professional. The second is an example of what you'd use on other resumes. That would be your name, perhaps your physical address here in New Haven, your Yale email address, but also your cell phone number. And here, this number is actually my office number. If you'd like to reach me, you can call that number. The second section on your resume is going to be education. Here's an example of how you should list your educational experiences. You should put the university to the left, the location on the right. You might need to include country. Underneath will be the name of the degree, and to the right will be either the expected date of graduation or the year in which you actually graduated. Here are some things that you might want to consider including under your education section. Relevant coursework, especially if the degree you received isn't obviously linked to your current interests, or if the degree is quite liberal studies oriented. It might be important to list some classes that you took so that the reader understands the kind of skill set that you bring. The second is a concentration, minor, or focus of study. That might be important if it's relevant to the kinds of jobs that you're looking for. The next is study abroad. A lot of students in the United States study abroad during their undergraduate years. Feel free to include that on your resume, but keep it just brief to one bullet point underneath your BA degree. And finally, consider a brief description of your academic awards. I want to take a moment here to talk about educational awards listed on your resume. A lot of universities offer awards to their students that are quite specific to the university and don't mean a lot to people outside of the university. So for example, you might have received an award, such as here I've said John Doe Award 2009, but it's not clear what that award is for, what accomplishment that is. So as you can see in my second bullet point here, you might want to say something about what the awards you received were for. Were they for outstanding work in your major? Were they for leadership? Were they for community involvement? Saying that'll mean a lot more to the reader than just the name of the award. Also, I wanted to add that because you're a student at Yale University, most readers will assume that you were an outstanding undergraduate student or student in other programs that you might have attended. So please don't list a lot of awards. It's not necessary. The next section of your resume is going to be experience. The first thing you want to do is think about how you want to divide up your experience. Do you just want to have one section on your resume called professional experience, or do you want to have two sections on your resume, perhaps dividing up the experiences based on the types of experiences they were? Maybe you have some political experiences, or maybe you have some federal government experiences, or some international development experiences. Does it make sense to have different headings for those, or do you just want to include them in one section? This is how I'd like you to format your experiences. First, put the name of the organization in bold and capital letters on the left, and put the location where you worked on the right. Underneath that, the title of your job in italics, and the right, the dates. Under that, you're going to have a series of bullets indicating what you did, what you accomplished, and any outcomes that came from the work that you completed. Here's an example of what to do, and please do not start a bullet with the word worked because it doesn't indicate any specific skill. You want to make sure that you're using skill words. In fact, if you go on Google and type in resume verbs, you'll find lists and lists of the types of words that you might select to use on your resume. In fact, I highly recommend that you do that because you might think of new words as you're looking at the lists that you haven't considered. Here's an example of what one of your experiences might look like. The person writing this resume worked for the Peace Corps in Beijing, China, as an education and volunteer from 2010 to 2012. They might have 2, 3, or maybe even 4 bullets underneath this heading, but one bullet might read as follows: developed curriculum and taught 30 high school students English, improving student test scores 45% from the previous year. This is a good way to write a bullet because it speaks to skills, developed, taught, and taught always speaks to communication, public speaking skills. And then improved test scores by 45% is a great example of how to quantify an accomplishment in a way that means a lot to the reader. After those sections, there's other sections that you might want to consider including depending on what your skills are. The first is languages. A lot of you have language skills, and you want to consider if that's something you want to list. Be sure when you list languages that you include your level of proficiency and that you consider whether or not you should list English. If you are a student who has English as a second language, you probably do want to list it. Or even if you are an English speaker but you're going to be applying to a lot of organizations internationally, you may want to make it clear to the reader that English is a language that you speak natively or fluently. Second, computer skills, especially Microsoft Word skills. Maybe there's statistical programs that you're able to use. Maybe you're able to use video programs or photography programs on a computer. Those are great skills to list if you're interested in continuing to use them. Next, leadership. Leadership is a section that most of you will not include, but if you don't have very much work experience, it can be a good way to indicate to readers that you are someone who is responsible. Next, published papers. If you've just published one paper or 2 papers, it might make sense to include it on your one-page resume. But if you've published a lot of papers or many articles, it's a good idea to include it on a separate page that wouldn't be sent to me for this initial resume, but could be sent as you apply for fellowships, internships, or jobs. Next, consider if you have any certifications that are relevant to readers. Have you done any major conference presentations that you feel are important to list? As for activities or interest, only add those if those are quite important to you. For example, maybe you play a musical instrument. Maybe you participate in some activities or sports quite seriously. But please don't include anything like, I enjoy traveling, or I have traveled a lot, or I enjoy reading. Those are too generic. And finally, consider whether or not you want to include your citizenship. It's not legal in the United States for employers to ask you what your citizenship is, but depending on where you end up applying, you might decide that it is important for you to include citizenship on your resume. Before you send me your resume, please double check it yourself. Please make sure that the format of your resume of each section is consistent. Please consider how your resume comes across to people who don't know you. Is it clear from the resume what experiences you've had and what you hope to be doing in the future? If I were to look at your resume, would I understand something about you and what it is that you're coming to Yale to do and what it is that you're hoping to do in the future? What story does that document tell? And finally, have you included everything that's important for you and for your future without being too repetitive? You don't want to list the same skills again and again and again. Once really is enough. And in the end, please have a friend or colleague look at your resume before you send it to me. I'm excited to meet you and to hear about your interests for both the summer and after graduation. We'll see you soon. Have a great summer.